Thank you for listening to The Luminous Mind, episode 69.
It's all in the title. Hang up and drive. Get off the phone. There's nothing on our phones that is so important, more important than your life or more important than my life. And think about if you were taken from this planet, the ripple that might come out of that.
Benjamin Franklin once said, "Do not curse the darkness, rather light a candle instead." If you're ready to set your mind on fire, then prepare yourself for the Luminous Mind with your host, Rebecca Bowman.
Today's fire starter is Jacy Good. Jacy is a nationally known and award advocate and public speaker for cell phone-free roads. In May of 2008, both her parents were killed, and Jacy herself was severely injured on the way home from her graduation ceremony from Muhlenberg College in Allentown, Pennsylvania. The devastating wreck was caused by a driver distracted by a cell phone conversation. Jacy now travels the country sharing her story at high schools, colleges, conferences, and corporate events in an effort to prevent such horrors from touching others' lives. Miss Good has been a guest on the Oprah Winfrey Show, Marie Shriver at the 2010 Women's Conference, and of the United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon at his call to the end of global epidemic of distracted driving. Jacy's been featured as a hero among us in People magazine and in January 2015 piece on CNN's The Human Factor, among many dozens of other print and television profiles. Together with her husband, Steve Johnson, she has crisscrossed the country, giving her Hang Up and Drive presentation to over 500 audiences since 2007. Welcome, Jacy.
Thank you.
If I can get through this interview without crying, that is going to be a huge feat. I mean, even reading your story, I was having a difficult time holding back the emotions of what you went through. Do you want to go through and just tell our audience a little bit more about yourself and give us some background?
Yeah, of course. I was born and raised in a small town in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I had an absolutely perfect childhood and upbringing and was just, I'm going to say, the most normal and average kid you'd ever meet. But I kind of sort of always had an idea of what I wanted out of life. I was lucky that I was always good at school, and so I always loved school, and I knew I wanted to go as far as I could. So I kind of set my sights on going away to college, and I worked really hard in high school and got myself to graduate. I think I was number 9 in my class of about 300 students.
That is great.
And yeah, it got me into my first choice college, which, as you stated, Muhlenberg College is about 2,000 students in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and it was a perfect fit for me. I spent 4 years there really kind of building who I was and who I wanted to become, and got myself through 4 years of college, again, with all sorts of honors and awards, because I was always the smart kid and the honor student. That was what I worked for. And when I graduated, it was May of 2008. I had been dating the same boy for all 4 years of college, and I knew what was coming next. I was going to work this perfect job I had been hired for with Habitat for Humanity, and I'd marry this boy, or so I was pretty sure I would, and thankfully it turned out that I did. And so we graduated on, it was Sunday, May 18th of 2008. I think our ceremony was around 10 o'clock that morning. Had this really perfect afternoon of having lunch with my whole family and kind of planning that next step of moving into the real world. I was going to live in New York City. I was so excited. And we left college, I think it was around 2 o'clock that afternoon, and the trip between college and home was an hour and a half. It was really easy. My parents and I got about halfway home that afternoon, and unfortunately, the trip came to an end. My parents and I were going south on this stretch of road. It's one lane in each direction, 45 miles an hour. anywhere there's an intersection, there's a light. And so we were headed south, coming to a green light, and at the same time going north, just opposite us, was an 18-wheeler, a milk truck.
Oh, my goodness.
He came to a green light as well. And at the same time, on the intersecting road, coming to a red light, was an 18-year-old young man, a senior in the high school there, was going to visit some of his friends from church camp. And his mom had told him he could use his phone while he drove if he did what she believed to be safe, which most of us believe to be safe. I believed it to be safe, putting his phone on speakerphone. And so he had made a call. His phone was on speakerphone. His hands were on the steering wheel. He got to that red light. He saw the red light and stopped, and then became so distracted by this conversation he was having that he forgot he was at a red light and tried to turn left. As he did that, this semi-truck swerved to try and miss him, and unfortunately swerved into my family's car.
Oh, my goodness.
As horrific as all of it was, thankfully, just a mile farther down the road lived a man who was getting home from church. He was getting out of his truck, and he heard the sound of this really loud crash, and he knew it was bad. And that man just happens to be a volunteer paramedic. His name is Dave. Dave jumped right back in his truck and drove down to this intersection. The truck driver and the young man had bumps and bruises, but they were basically okay. He came to our family's station wagon, and my dad had a really faint pulse, but it faded right away. The truck had just picked up 30 tons of milk, and my dad took the brunt of the impact. My mom had been in the rear passenger seat, the farthest from the point of impact, except we had stopped at a gas station 5 minutes earlier. When she left there, she hadn't put her seatbelt back on. So Mom ended up in the front seat and didn't even have a pulse when that paramedic got to her. And I think I have to take some comfort because that paramedic assures me that neither of them suffered, that they were both killed instantly. And thankfully that paramedic came to help, came to me in the front passenger seat, and I had a really strong pulse, except I wasn't breathing. He's a paramedic. He knew what he was doing. He moved my head, and he kept me alive. The next intersection down had an ambulance station. A lot of things came together really perfectly right to keep me alive, and I think to allow me to share this story.
Wow. That's incredible. See, I told you. My husband, when he was actually the one who found your story, and he was showing it to me. Like I said, I couldn't even read through it or listen to your message without crying. So do you want to give us kind of what you went through, and then how you, I mean, obviously you have a mission of hang up and drive is your mission, and give us kind of the inspiration behind that message.
Yeah. I mean, from there, thankfully, I survived the first few hours that those doctors say. You know, I still see the doctors who were in the operating room that night who tell me they don't care how old I get, I will always be their miracle child, because none of them expected me to live. I think my neurosurgeon gave me about a 10% chance of surviving that night, between my broken bones and blood clots and a brain injury and damaged arteries and lungs and liver and everything you can damage. It seemed as though it was damaged. I survived that first night. Thankfully, don't have any memories from the first 2 months of living in a hospital where apparently I was fighting to stay alive. I was back and forth and just kind of a constant risk. Thankfully, I survived all that. Incredible medical care kept me alive, and got myself finally to moving into a rehab hospital. It was 2 more months living in the rehab hospital, and that meant relearning how to live my life. Brain injury left my left side is paralyzed, that I can't move really my arm or my leg beyond the absolute necessity. I'm lucky I can walk, I can live an independent life, but mostly with just the use of kind of the larger muscles in my left side. Spent about 3 years in therapy full-time beyond living in the hospital, trying to understand what had happened to me. And I guess my mission started pretty early, even within that year, about 6 months after I was out of the hospital. And I was doing research. I found that when this case went to the judge, he decided because it was caused by a cell phone and the use of a cell phone was not illegal on Pennsylvania roads where this happened, no criminal charges were necessary. That was the most difficult information I could have been dealt. It was as difficult as learning to live without my parents, that it was legal to kill people doing something that, from my point of view, we knew it was dangerous to use a phone and drive. In 2008, when this happened, we knew it was dangerous when I was 16 years old, now 28, 12 years ago. We knew it was dangerous to use a phone and drive because that's what my parents taught me when I learned how to drive. And so that was kind of really what inspired me to take action, initially just trying to get a law passed in Pennsylvania to put an end to the use of at least handheld cell phone use behind the wheel.
Yeah.
It's a really long and difficult battle in a lot of states, and unfortunately it gets politicized too often. For me, it's about safety, and in most states, every one of these votes goes right down the aisle. That blue all votes were one way and red all votes the other way. So that's been a very big challenge to get laws passed.
Well, and you said that this driver wasn't even using his hands. I mean, he wasn't holding it. He had it on speakerphone, but just the act of calling somebody and being distracted by that call caused this wreck. And so even a hands-free sort of situation isn't necessarily safe. So.
Yeah, and that's what I've come to learn when you start to look into this even just a little bit. And I'm lucky I've been trained by a lot of kind of the big and most respected safety organizations in this country. It's about what you're doing. You know, it's the manual distraction of taking your hand off the wheel isn't really that much of a distraction. Taking your eyes off the road is distracting, but most people are smart enough to not do it for very long. And then what happens too often when you're just talking on the phone, it's that act of taking your brain off the road, this kind of cognitive impairment that happens when you're just having a conversation. And I suppose the laws have been good because even states that only have a texting law, people use their phones overall less. States that have the complete handheld ban, it just makes people think twice, and people do tend to use their phones less in those states.
Well, and pulling over to take that call, you're allowing yourself to be focused on that call. So through all this experience, how has your paradigm changed over time and with experience?
I spent a long time trying to figure out how my life could go on. I didn't think I could survive without my parents. You know, I was 21 years old when this happened. I was stuck in a wheelchair, and I had no idea what my life might bring.
Were you even able to go to their funeral? Because you said you spent 2 months.
No, I was in a coma in a hospital, so wow. I wasn't able to go. As difficult as that was, I am grateful that I am in my shoes and not my big brother. You know, my big brother drove separately, so thankfully he was physically unharmed. He had gone to visit some friends, but it left him with the responsibility of informing our grandparents that their children had been killed that day and having that task of planning a funeral.
Oh my goodness.
Thankfully, someone somewhere along the line had enough foresight to videotape the funeral, so I was able to view the funeral and have that bit of closure that was so important.
Now would be a great time to learn more about our sponsors.
Hello, Firestarters. It's Mark here. I know there comes a time each week when you listen to all the Luminous Mind podcasts that are available, and in a sad voice you ask yourself, what am I to do now? Well, despair no more. Just go to theluminousmind.net and start your free 30-day trial from Audible and download 2 free audiobooks. Now you can fill that downtime while you wait for the next Luminous Mind podcast with a great book from the world's largest selection of professionally narrated audiobooks. You can choose from over 180,000 titles, including new releases and bestsellers, And you can exchange any book you don't love anytime, no questions asked, with a great listen guarantee. So until the next episode, start reading and keep the fire burning.
Welcome back to The Luminous Mind with Jacy Good and Hang Up and Drive. So we've talked a little bit about your advocacy work, but do you want to tell us, and of course in your intro I talked about it, but what you've done as an advocate for Hang Up and Drive?
Yeah, it all started with a press conference in Harrisburg trying to get a law passed in 2009. While the legislative end of things was frustrating, it was a press conference, and so it got my name out as an advocate on the issue. And kind of the more I did, the more I've been able to do. It's difficult to share this story, but in doing work with so many incredible people, I started to be able to see that as important as the laws really and truly are, I think the thing that will make the biggest difference is kind of this individual accountability, that we're paying attention to what we're doing and taking responsibility for our actions. And the only way that's going to happen is if we start to see kind of the cultural change that we've seen with so many other issues on our roads, whether it's seatbelts, which now have thankfully a very high percentage of people do use their seatbelts. I know for me, the way I was raised, thankfully, my parents taught better than maybe my mom participated, but they taught me that we didn't go. The car didn't drive if we didn't have our seatbelts on, and so I don't go anywhere without my seatbelt. We've kind of created this really, really big stigma against drinking and driving, that it's not okay. It's not socially acceptable. We know cell phones are every bit as dangerous, if not more dangerous, when you start to look at these stats and look at the science that is out there. And there is a whole lot of science out there.
Yeah.
It's every bit as dangerous. And
regardless the amount of laws that you pass, unless we educate ourselves to how dangerous this is, I mean, people could still possibly do this illegally. So we need to just be smart and put that away so that we don't do any more harm to any other people or to ourselves.
Exactly.
So that's why I'm grateful to have you on, to hopefully educate the families around us. So what successes have you seen with your advocacy?
I grew up in Pennsylvania, but that boyfriend stuck around. We got married a year and a half ago, and he actually convinced me to move back to his hometown in New York State. And within New York State, I've helped pass some of the strongest laws in the whole country for, if you get pulled over and a phone is in your hands. I know it's not the whole solution, but if that phone is in your hand, it's 5 points on your license plus a pretty nasty fine. And there's a lot of data within New York State showing that that's making a difference. I've been able to share this story at this point. I started speaking. The first school I spoke at was in 2010, and that kind of set me in a new direction. And by 2011, this was a full-time career. Since 2011, I've spoken at over 500 different events between high schools and colleges and corporate audiences who are liable for the actions of their drivers on the roads.
Yeah, that's one thing we don't think about. Sometimes we give an employee a cell phone and a car, kind of like giving him a drink, as he's walking out the door too. And then we're expecting him to work while he's driving.
Yeah, and when you start to look at this, there's a big concern about productivity. And for so many of us, I know we've made cars really easy to drive, and it doesn't feel like you need to use your brain so much when you're driving. But when it comes down to it, you do need to use your brain. And I've heard so many stories from so many people that they don't think it affects them. And then they stop and they think, oh, that time I missed my exit because I was on the phone, or that time I hung up and had no idea how I had gotten to where I was. that's exactly what this is. And maybe it's no big deal when you miss your exit, but that's all those other unpredictable things that could be happening on the road that you might not be seeing, even if it's right in front of your eyes.
Yeah, you could run over a child. I mean, there's so many situations, actions have consequences like that. And I mean, one time you may be able to get away with it. I mean, 50 times you may be able to get away with it, but one time makes the difference to everybody. So I told you this is going to be coming out in the summertime when families are traveling a lot. How do you think families can benefit from your message? How can they avoid this pain? That's kind of a silly question, but...
No, but it takes a concerted effort, even for me. Phones are such incredible devices that we have created for ourselves, and I love my phone, but you'll have to learn how to draw the line and what works for you, because there's really something ingrained in our brains when we hear the beeps and boops that a phone will make. It is incredibly difficult to resist because you always feel like it won't happen to you. And maybe it's dangerous when other people use their phones and drive, but you're a good driver and you're the one who can handle this. Unfortunately, if everyone's saying that, there's somewhere that it's gonna crack. For me, my phone goes on silent. It's not connected to the Bluetooth that it could be that's built into my car. It goes in the glove box usually or the back seat. I know I'm not going to use it. My voicemail says I might be driving. If I'm a passenger in the car, I speak up. I take my husband's phone from him when he's driving and I'm in the passenger seat, and I do anything that needs to be done.
Yeah.
Designated texter, a term that was come up with from a high school student I met who really put a lot of work into trying to help educate, and I love it. A designated driver, a designated texter. It makes all the sense in the world when you stop and think about it.
It's the same sort of distraction. My kids are my designated texters. So they've learned how to use my phone when I drive. And I definitely support that message of not answering your phone. It's really hard, especially if you're sitting at a long stoplight or something like that. But even that minute, of not being able to respond to what's going on the road makes a big difference.
Exactly.
So Jacy, what are your long-term goals? What do you hope to accomplish with your advocacy?
I think what's difficult for me is that this happened to me. In May will be 7 years ago, and the stories I know, the friends I've made of families who lost someone they love since then, because the same thing, and it's just so senseless, so preventable. I would love to see laws in every state. In the U.S., we have to pass our traffic laws on a state level. The laws need to be there. People need to be punished when they kill someone doing something we know is dangerous. I want these deaths, these injuries to come to an end. It's completely preventable, but only if we do something about it.
Well, and you're still living with your injuries. Even if you don't kill somebody with it, it's a lifetime thing with you now, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm so lucky. The things that I lost physically, a lot of them were temporary. It was living in the rehab hospital, it was learning how to walk, learning how to feed myself and how to dress myself. And these simple things I maybe always taken for granted. But that thankfully I can live a fully independent life in spite of those things that I've lost. It just takes a little bit of creativity, but it is seemingly for the rest of my life.
Wow. So if you could leave a legacy, what would it be?
It's all in the title. Hang up and drive. Get off the phone. There's nothing on our phones that is so important, more important than your life or more important than my life. And think about if you were taken from this planet, the ripple that might come out of that. It's looking at my family. My family was cut in half. But it's also the fact that, my mom was the awesome 8th grade English teacher, and the next day was Monday, and that meant 300 kids came to school to find a substitute and about a dozen extra guidance counselors to help them deal with the loss of someone.
Gosh.
It was so important to them.
My goodness. So do you have any final parting words of advice or maybe a favorite quote that you'd like to share with our listeners. And then please give us your contact information and so we can learn more about you and your mission and how to be a better advocate for hanging up and driving.
Yeah, I think kind of maybe the overarching message, even beyond the phones, is that, life is hard enough on its own. None of us get through unscathed, whether it's a broken heart or losing a loved one. It happens to all of us. And in my traveling and meeting new people constantly, I've learned that in the end, we're really all pretty much the same. We hear a lot about divisions, but we are all so similar. And if we can do something to prevent even just a little bit of this pain based on how difficult life might be to begin with, maybe we have an obligation to each other, to these people we don't know out there on the roads to help take care of each other and make this life just a little bit easier, be a little bit nicer on an everyday basis to help make this world a little bit safer and a little bit better.
Well, and we all have a mission. Let us help each other live our mission and have lives of happiness. So what's your contact information as well?
The best way to get in touch is probably through our website, hangupanddrive.com. That's got a phone number and an email on there. You can reach out, or if it's easier, I am also somehow the only Jacy Good in the world. JacyGood. I'm the only one out there, and I'm on the Facebook and the Twitter and the LinkedIn and all those fun social medias, and love sharing this message through those venues.
That is funny. And you are doing a lot of good with your message, and so I appreciate that. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And like I said, it's going to air in the summertime when people are driving, so let's take her message to heart and hang up and drive. Thank you for listening to The Luminous Mind. To learn more about Jacy Good and Hang Up and Drive, go to our show notes at theluminousmind.net. Also, be sure to become a subscriber to our free email list so you can receive notifications for the weekly audio blog, The Spark. We would love to have you join our program. Do so by going to the scheduling tab and become a fire starter today. Help support the podcast by making all your Amazon purchases through the free Amazon widget on our website, theluminousmind.net. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Google+. Get our audio content on YouTube, iTunes, and Stitcher. Leave us a review. Tell us how we can help you so together we can continue to light minds on fire and change the paradigm of education.